As a graphic designer, the opening ceremonies at the Tokyo Olympics had one segment that definitively blew my socks off: the tribute to pictograms. Not only was it masterful TV, but it also showcased the utility and undeniable charm of the humble pictogram. So in this video, we'll dive deep on these mini masterpieces. I'll explain how pictograms became integral to the Olympics, where they came from, and I'll try my hand at designing one myself for a sport you probably won't expect. So make like a figure and stick around. A pictogram is a graphic symbol that represents a concept or item. Much like the icons we use in apps every day, pictograms are usually part of a larger set or library which share a common visual style. While there were a handful of earlier instances of pictograms, the 1964 Tokyo Olympics was the first major international event to use pictograms to help non-Japanese speakers navigate not only the sports, but also facilities and venues around the city. This was the first time this form of visual communication had been formalized, deployed, and tested at such scale. Beyond the 20 pictograms for each of the sports represented at the games, an additional 39 service pictograms were developed to communicate everything from bus stations to laundry to saunas, including the very first time these symbols became the standard for toilets. The symbols we encounter on a daily basis in public spaces owe a debt to this first testing bed for the concept. A picture is worth 1,000 words, or at least a dozen languages, particularly when it comes to events and spaces where visitors may not be literate in the local language. Looking at this set of 20, designed by Yoshiro Yamashita, they still hold up strikingly well. Assuming you're familiar with them, each sport is quickly identifiable, with very little ambiguity between any two pictograms. Yet the whole set fits together well. If I had to nitpick, I would say that judo and weightlifting stick out for being the only two with figures front on instead of in profile, as well as sailing for having no human figures in it. But overall, it's very successful and to the point. So successful that they've become an integral part of the Olympics ever since. The following Summer Games in Mexico 1968 were a complete stylistic departure, and while overall the visual identity of those games was very iconic, the pictograms were less so. Rather than focusing on the human figure, they went more abstract, with sporting equipment or a single limb standing in to represent the athlete. From a cohesiveness perspective, this set is much less even than the previous. Some icons are very simplified with geometric, inorganic shapes, yet others seem like someone just traced a photograph. I love these interlinked arms for wrestling, but side by side with this arm for swimming, I can't tell if these fingers are outstretched or in a fist. How would this hand go inside this rounded square boxing glove? It certainly feels like they were designed by separate people without a common vision. The next Olympics at Munich 1972 went to the other extreme. In behavior that could be borderline offensively stereotypical of Germans, this set of pictograms designed by Gerhard Joch was rationalized into a rigid grid system of exclusively 90 and 45 degree angles. It goes even further in abstracting the human form than the Tokyo team. Because of that and the exacting control over every visual aspect of the games by lead designer Otto Eicher, it definitely feels consistent, but I think there are cases where the rigidity of that system actually makes it hard to quickly grasp the meaning. This symbol made me think of a baseball player skidding into home base, not sailing. The forms of the sail being so recessive, this gymnast too looks more like a ballerina with a possible deformity of the ribcage. In fact, this ultra-rational system ends up giving the athletes extreme differences in neck length, which is somewhat disturbing. Having said that, the football and boxing pictograms are fantastic and remain iconic to this day, and the legacy of the system was felt for decades after. In fact, they were so successful that they used the same system with a few modifications for the following Olympics in Montreal 1976. Moscow 1980, Los Angeles 84, and Seoul 88 all felt like variations on a theme. In 1992, however, we get the first break away from that formalism. Instead, we get these expressive brushstrokes in a much looser design by Josep Maria Trias and his team. I believe there are two reasons this happens in 1992. Firstly, by this point, it's been almost 30 years since the public first encountered modern pictograms in '64. People are used to seeing them in airports, airports, hospitals, and in sports. It feels safer to break with convention now that it's become established. Secondly, we see the introduction of digital design tools around this time. I'm going to take an educated guess here and assume to make these pictograms, Trias was creating many hundreds of different brushstrokes using analog media like markers, scanning that into a computer, and then cleaning up, manipulating, and arranging those elements digitally. That would have been much harder to pull off using film transfers and traditional tools of the pre-digital era. The next evolution of the pictogram came 2 years later at the Lillehammer Winter Games in Norway. While I won't go into the Winter Olympics in this video, this one had a major impact across both games. Sarah Rosenbaum and the Designgruppen team really integrated the local history in a way never seen before, taking inspiration from a 4,000-year-old rock painting in northern Norway believed to be the first known image of a person on skis. This led to a movement away from the classical forms of pictograms for the next decade. Atlanta 1996 being an outlier in the group for going for something more akin to classical illustration in homage to the 100th anniversary of the modern Olympics. It also takes first prize for the most bumtastic pictogram concept. But in Sydney 2000, Athens 2004, and Beijing 2008, we clearly see the pattern established in Lillehammer. We see a local cultural motif used in all three: the boomerang, antique vases, and ancient seals, all serving as the visual concept that moves the role of the pictogram to more of a cultural signpost. For London 2012 and Rio 2016, we pivot slightly from cultural motif to seeing the pictogram as more of an extension of the branding of the games themselves, with more emphasis on harmonizing the concept with the emblem for the games than any cultural artifact in particular. London 2012 actually tried to have it both ways by having two versions of the pictograms, a silhouette version for wayfinding and more functional use, and a dynamic version used for advertising and more illustrative use, with its crisscrossing lines said to be a nod to the London Underground. Like most of the identity for 2012, it ended up being pretty Marmite. You either love it or hate it. Rio's pictograms, by comparison, were much simpler, with fluid lines reflecting the identity for the games, taking the stroke thickness from the typography of the emblem, and the unique pebble holding shape being part of the larger brand system. Rio was also notable for being the first time that each of the Paralympic events received their own individual pictograms. The first set of sports pictograms at Tokyo 64 totaled 20. This year's pictograms total 73, 50 Olympic and 23 Paralympic events. So let's compare the pictograms of this Olympics to the original set from 1964. I'd argue the level of challenge for Masaki Hiramura and the design team is much higher than for their counterparts a half-century ago. Remember our original criteria: make them understandable at a glance, stylistically consistent, but also visually distinct from each other. That last point becomes exponentially harder the more pictograms are added to the set. Here are a selection of the current pictograms, which we can divide into a few groups. We have cycling, which is self-contained, but then we have water sports, equestrian, and ball sports, which all slightly intersect. We have subgroups like racket and paddle sports, and ball sports pictograms where only the top half of the torso is depicted. Each group brings potential for visual similarities. After all, they all use the same visual elements. The designers have very cleverly tried to vary the orientation of the figure or the level of crop amongst groups of icons, which could be easily confused. Golf and hockey, baseball and softball, for example, are deliberate to use top torso versus a full body framing to keep them distinct from each other. Handball and basketball share similar poses, but are mirrored from each other for clarity. If that wasn't enough, add in the fact that in recent years, each international sporting federation has had to sign off on their respective individual pictograms, and for Tokyo 2020, they've added the extra challenge of adding motion design on top, and you quickly sense how this is no small undertaking. Now it's time to put my money where my mouth is. The next Summer Games in Paris 2024 are adding a few new sports to the roster, so I decided to take a stab at making a pictogram in the Tokyo style for breaking, aka breakdancing, ahead of its official debut. But Before I show you that, I'm going to ask you to give a like below if you've enjoyed this so far to appease my algorithmic overlords. Then I wanted to touch on that amazing live segment from the opening ceremony. So I hit up my mate Fernand on Twitter. He's a fellow designer with an unrivaled passion for all things live TV. Over to you, Fernand.
That's probably the 50th time I've seen this. Thanks, Linus. And yes, this is particularly exciting and geek-worthy to me, as it combines two of my passions: big, huge, live, shiny events and graphic design. Bringing it kicking and screaming to 2021, what I particularly enjoyed is the animation of these, bringing a 3D dimension to otherwise flat shapes. Dubbed Kinetic Sports Pictograms launched for the first time, which, about time too, adds satisfyingly eased motion, smooth, flowy lines, with a motion blur of sorts and a kind of solid animation in step with the design vernacular that animates in and out to little dots or circles where it all begins. And it's all about the little interesting bits of detail which I like, especially this one here for the weightlifter, the little tremble as it gets the weight into place is amazing. And what a way to pay homage to them 2021 style by making these human figures human. 4 minutes and 30 seconds of live action bringing these shapes to life. Its fast transitions from one form to the other, infusing skill and a little bit of humour, is unmistakably Japanese. It's a page taken from one of Japan's long-running entertainment shows called Masquerade, or Kasu Taishu. I probably said that terribly wrong. Apologies to any Japanese viewers. This show, with its actors and its stagehand actors being smartly camouflaged, displayed creative genius in storytelling and action, with well-timed movements to simulate immersive three-dimensional action. You guys remember the viral Matrix ping pong stage act which used cleverly hidden stagehands to manipulate the action? This style of performance, you could say, was paid tribute to in this pictogram display. The clever combination of camera whip pans and seamless transitions makes this entire sequence an absolute joy to watch. Points in particular go to the easiest segue of basketball to its 3x3 counterpart, the cameo of the stagehand representing the sailing, the hand puppets, we love a good hand puppet, we do, and the 7-hit combo from water polo to artistic swimming. And apart from the very minor fumble, he held his position, he nailed the landing. I'd say it was a flawless victory. And with Olympic ceremonies typically being absolutely jaw-dropping, this little segment will definitely go down as one to remember of this year's Olympic Games. I'm gonna go watch it again, it's just that good. It's just an image, I'll watch it on my phone.
Check out his fantastic channel, Fernand's Live Show, for more brilliant telly trivia. So to begin designing my own pictogram, I started by investigating poses. I soon settled on a one-handed freeze. It feels quite iconic and distinct to breakdancing. It also helped for distinctiveness that there aren't too many pictograms already with the figure upside down. Feeling confident, I found a few reference images and immediately ruled some of them out for being too asymmetrical. The final pictogram has to sit nicely within a circle. Then I took some references from the existing pictograms to get proportions for the limbs, head and trunk, and simply lined them up over the reference images. And no, that looks completely rubbish. Nope. They were somehow getting even worse. At least I was proving my point. It was not as simple as it might look. So I changed my approach and looked for something in the original set to base the design off, aka I stole. I found the surfing pictogram had the figure holding the board with a posture much closer to the pose I wanted than the references I had used earlier. From here, I tweaked and tweaked, trying to find the balance between a realistic pose and visual clarity. Of course, in real life, I would need to come up with a few options, at least 2, maybe up to 5, to present to the relevant international sporting federation, in this case, the World Dance Sport Federation, for feedback, and this would only be the first step in the design process. But this is YouTube and it's purely for entertainment, so I'm going to leave it there. Good luck to the designers working on the pictograms for Paris 2024. My only advice is I wouldn't lean too hard into the emblem thematically, as it does look like the logo for a hair salon and nothing good can come from running with scissors. My name is Linus and I've said pictogram enough times to last me the next 4 years. Thanks for watching, see you next time.